Greater than, it was a Thursday night. The kind of night where you just want to go home, but something deep inside whispers, go out. Go see. I didn't know it yet, but in less than 5 minutes my life would split into a before and an after. The door to the bar was heavier than I remembered. I had passed it 100 times on my way home from work but never stepped inside. That night I did. Maybe it was my friend's persistence, maybe it was the silence of my apartment echoing louder than usual, but I went. The bar was dim and warm, the smell of whiskey and wood polish curling up around me like a shawl. A guitarist played soft notes in the corner. Couples and groups of friends sat in booths, murmuring, laughing. I tried to relax, to believe this was just another night. My best friend Maya was already at the counter. "You made it," she said, hugging me. "One drink, that's all I ask. You're always waiting at home for Daniel like some ghost bride." She was teasing, but the words stung. We ordered wine and settled into a corner. I told myself to put my phone away, not to check his messages. Daniel was working late, like always. I stared at the wine, swirling it. For months I had been swallowing my doubts like bitter medicine. Then it happened. Maya froze mid-sentence, her eyes flicking over my shoulder. "Anna," she said slowly. "Don't look now, but..." I turned before she could finish. Across the room, in a half-lit booth near the back, sat Daniel. My Daniel. His hair, the suit jacket I'd ironed for him just 2 days ago, the familiar tilt of his head. And beside him, a woman. She was young, early 20s, her scarlet dress hugging her like a promise. Her manicured hand rested on his thigh as if it had always belonged there. My brain tried to rationalize. A client, a cousin, some misunderstanding. But then Daniel leaned in, whispered something into her hair, and she giggled, tipping her head back. My stomach flipped. The glass in my hand trembled. I couldn't hear Maya anymore. All the bar's sounds had turned into a dull roar. Then Daniel noticed me. The bartender had gestured toward me, or maybe he just sensed my gaze. His eyes locked on mine. For a heartbeat, he looked surprised. Then his mouth curled into a smirk I had never seen before. "Just a foolish girlfriend," he said loudly enough for me, and probably half the bar, to hear. His arm tightened around the woman. She laughed harder, as if on cue. The words hit me like a slap. Just a foolish girlfriend. 3 years of dinners, birthdays, late-night talks, doctor visits, bills paid together, reduced to a sneer in a smoky bar. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the wine. I simply stood. The floor felt sticky under my shoes. Maya rose too, her face pale. "Anna, wait," but I was already moving. Past the tables, past the music, past the bartender's startled glance. Out the door. The night air was cold, sharp. I gulped it like water. My hands shook as I hailed a cab, but none stopped. Maya caught up to me outside, grabbing my arm. "Come on, let's go home," she whispered. I nodded mutely. In the cab, she held my hand, but I couldn't speak. My mind was a slideshow of images. Ironing his shirts, defending him to my parents, waiting up while he was at the office. Each memory cracked like glass under a hammer. When we reached my apartment, I knew what I had to do. I didn't even take off my coat. I started pulling clothes from the closet, folding them into a suitcase. My movements felt mechanical, like I was watching someone else. On the kitchen counter, I left a note. It said only, "Goodbye." Maya offered to stay, but I shook my head. I needed space. I took the suitcase and walked out, the apartment door clicking shut like a final period at the end of a sentence. At my sister Emily's house across town, I finally broke. I sobbed into her couch, my fists pressed to my eyes. "I don't understand," I kept whispering. "I gave him everything. Wasn't I enough?" Emily stroked my hair. "It's not about you being enough," she said quietly. "It's about him not being honest. And you don't have to stay where you're not respected." Her words were like a thin thread in the dark. I held onto it. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. "Daniel, you're overreacting. It's not what it looked like." Then, "I'm sorry. Please come back. We can fix this." I deleted them without opening. Yet a hollow ache sat inside me, deeper than anger. I had built my days around him, his coffee, his shirts, his dreams. Mine had been waiting on a shelf, collecting dust. At night I scrolled through old photos, trips, birthdays, inside jokes. It felt like watching strangers. The girl smiling next to him, me, looked so hopeful. I didn't recognize her anymore. On the third morning, Emily placed a cup of coffee in front of me. You can stay here as long as you need, she said, but you have to decide who you are without him. That sentence echoed. Who was I without him? I found a notebook and started a list. Things I loved before Daniel. Painting, running, volunteering at the animal shelter. Things I wanted. My own studio, maybe a small online shop. The list felt like a lifeline, shaky but real. That afternoon I signed up for a weekend art class. I went for a run, one slow block at a time. Every step away from that bar felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. But healing wasn't neat. One night I saw a photo online of Daniel and the woman, his mistress, at some party, smiling like a magazine ad. The old anger surged back. My finger hovered over the send button to text him all the things I wanted to scream. Instead, I put the phone down and reached for a paintbrush. The canvas became my confession. Colors bled into each other, reds, blacks, then gold streaks cutting through like dawn. It was messy, raw, but it was mine. For the first time in weeks, I felt strong, not broken. As I stood in front of that half-finished canvas, breathing hard but steady, I realized that leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. I stood before the canvas, brush trembling in my hand. The reds and blacks bled like old wounds, but the gold streaks cut through them like light fighting its way into a dark room. I stared at it for a long time, my breathing uneven, my heart hammering. There was a time I would have texted Daniel, begged him to explain, clung to any scrap of hope. But tonight the brush felt better than the phone. The act of painting felt like breathing after being underwater for too long. In the weeks that followed, my life looked unrecognizable compared to the girl who used to wait by the door with dinner warming on the stove. I woke up early, laced up my old running shoes, and ran along the river until my lungs burned. The first days were brutal. My body protested, my mind whispered that it was useless. But every morning when I returned, sweat-drenched and exhausted, there was a small, hard seed of pride inside me. I had done something for myself. No one could take that from me. I kept going to the weekend art class. The studio smelled of turpentine and clay, and at first I felt like an imposter among the other students, people who seemed confident, sure of their strokes. But my teacher, a soft-spoken woman named Marisol, glanced at my work one Saturday and said quietly, "There's a lot of feeling here. Don't hide it." Her words landed like a blessing. For 3 hours every weekend, I lost myself in color and shape, my pain flowing onto the paper instead of curling up inside me. I rarely spoke to Daniel. Now, his texts had dwindled from pleading to angry to silent. Once he sent a long email, full of excuses. He'd been stressed, he'd been drinking, he'd been lonely. For a moment, old habits tugged at me, the reflex to soothe, to forgive, to believe. But I read the email twice, then clicked delete. That small act felt like closing a door and locking it from the inside. At night, lying in the guest room at Emily's house, I began to imagine a future. At first the images were fragile, like sketches on thin paper. A small apartment of my own, a corner for painting, maybe even an online shop. Then the sketches grew more detailed. I could almost see myself at a gallery, people pausing in front of my work, feeling something. It scared me, this idea that I could have a life without him, but it thrilled me too. One evening after class, Marisol approached me. "We're having a community show next month," she said. "Would you like to submit something?" The question startled me. Me, show my paintings. My first impulse was to shrink back, to say I wasn't ready. But the small voice inside whispered, "Why not?" I nodded slowly. "I'd like that." Preparing for the show gave me a focus. I chose 2 pieces. The one born from the night I nearly texted Daniel, and another softer one I'd painted later, all blues and whites and hints of sunrise. I worked on the frames late into the night, music playing softly, Emily peeking in with tea and smiles. For the first time since leaving Daniel, I felt a sense of direction. Not just surviving, building. The night of the gallery opening, my hands shook as I pinned my name card beneath the frames. The room buzzed with chatter, the smell of fresh paint and anticipation mingling in the air. People wandered in, murmuring. I wanted to run, but Emily squeezed my shoulder. "Breathe," she whispered. "You belong here." I watched strangers stop at my paintings, tilt their heads, lean in closer. A woman in a navy business suit paused at the red, black and gold canvas. She studied it for a long moment, then looked at me. "This is powerful," she said. "Do you sell your work?" Her question stunned me. I stammered. She smiled, handed me a card. "Call me. I curate pieces for corporate spaces. We like art with emotional resonance." When she walked away, I clutched the card like a passport. Emily's eyes were shining. "See," she whispered, "you're not just surviving, you're shining." That night we celebrated with cheap champagne in paper cups. For the first time in months, I laughed until my sides hurt. I moved into my own apartment a few weeks later, a small place with creaky floors and big windows. I set up a corner as my studio. The first morning sunlight streamed through, touching my paints, my canvases, my coffee mug. It felt like a benediction. Meanwhile, my little online shop went live. At first it was just friends and a few strangers buying prints. Then more people found it. I posted short videos of my process, talking honestly about healing and art. Comments began to pour in. "Your story gives me courage. I left my toxic relationship too. I bought this print because it feels like hope." I realized I wasn't just selling paintings, I was telling a story of survival and rebirth. Viewers weren't just buying colors on a canvas. They were buying the proof that someone could walk away from a sneer in a bar and build something beautiful from the rubble. One evening, as I was packaging a painting to ship overseas, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. For a moment my stomach clenched. But the voice on the other end was soft, a volunteer from a local women's shelter. "We've been following your videos," she said. "Would you come speak to our residents? Your story could help." My first instinct was to say no. I wasn't a speaker. I was just a woman who left. But then I thought of all the nights I'd sat on Emily's couch feeling like nothing, scrolling through photos of Daniel, wondering who I was without him. If my story could reach even one person in that place, how could I refuse? I said yes. Standing at the podium weeks later, my hands trembled. Rows of women sat before me, some with bruises, some with haunted eyes, some holding small children. I told them everything. The bar, the mistress, the sneer, the night I left. My voice cracked but I kept going. Leaving wasn't weakness, I said finally. It was the first brushstroke of my new life. When I finished, the room rose in applause. Women came up to hug me, to whisper their own stories. One said, "Because of you, I'm going to leave tonight." Another pressed a small, crumpled note into my hand, "Thank you for reminding me I'm worth more." I left the shelter shaken but glowing. On the bus home, I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. For the first time, I felt that the pain I had endured might serve a purpose beyond myself. Back at my apartment, the unfinished gold-streaked canvas still leaned against the wall. I picked up a brush and signed my name across the bottom, full and clear. Then I took a photo and posted it with a caption. "Once, at a bar, someone called me a foolish girlfriend. Tonight, I call myself an artist." The comments flooded in. People wrote things like, "Your story makes me feel braver. Because of you, I filed for divorce today. Thank you for showing me it's possible." I realized then that my story had become bigger than me. It was about anyone who had ever been belittled, betrayed, or broken, and had chosen to stand up anyway. Months later, I was invited to exhibit at a larger gallery in the city. On opening night, as I walked through the halls lined with my paintings, a sense of calm settled over me. I thought about Daniel, but the thought didn't sting anymore. In some strange way, his betrayal had forced me to find myself. Without that night at the bar, I might still be waiting at home, a shadow of myself. At the end of the evening, a young woman approached me shyly. "I follow your channel," she said. "I'm still with someone who treats me badly. I'm scared to leave." I took her hands. "I know it's terrifying," I said softly. "But you're not just someone's foolish girlfriend. You're the author of your own story. The first step is the hardest, but it's also the most powerful." She nodded, tears in her eyes. In that moment, I saw myself as I had been, standing in the cold outside the bar. And I silently promised her that she, too, could get to this side of the story. Later that night, walking home under a sky full of stars, I thought about everything, the betrayal, the art, the speaking, the women I'd met. My life was still a work in progress, but it was mine. Every brushstroke, every scar, every sunrise belonged to me now. When I reached my apartment, I opened the window and let the night air in. I sat at my easel, dipped my brush into gold paint, and began a new canvas. This one wasn't about pain. It was about hope, about rebirth, about the light that breaks through even the darkest skies. As I painted, I recorded a short voiceover for my next video. If you're watching this and you feel stuck, I said softly, know this, walking away isn't weakness. It's the first brushstroke of your new life. I uploaded it before bed. By morning, it had gone viral. Messages poured in from around the world, people of all ages telling me they'd left, they'd healed, they'd started again. My little apartment buzzed like a hive of stories and hope. Standing there in the sunlight, phone in hand, paint on my fingers, I felt a quiet, fierce joy. The girl in the bar was gone. In her place stood a woman who had chosen herself. And that, I realized, was the true ending of my story, not the betrayal, not the leaving, but the choosing. The choice to stop being someone's secret or someone's afterthought. The choice to be my own beginning. I set down the phone, wiped my hands on my apron, and picked up my brush. There was a whole canvas waiting. There was a whole life waiting. And for the first time, I couldn't wait to meet it.